There's a lot of things that go on in your head before you ever consider leaving the church. I just wanted to make a video here explaining my side of things and I guess explaining why I'm making this channel and partly why I left Orthodoxy. Of course, when I speak about Orthodoxy, I'm talking about Christianity and not Judaism. I haven't quite figured out my name I'm going for yet for this channel. But yeah, let me just get into, I guess, what led me to leave. I guess in order to do that, I need to talk about what led me to join. And so I personally was not quite cradle and not quite convert. For those who don't know what those mean, a cradle is, of course, someone who is born into it. They have usually Orthodox parents. They were raised in that path. If you're a convert, it means you were not born into it. I wasn't born into it. I just joined at a really, really young age. So I guess the reason I went into it is because my home life was not the best, and the person who I relied on to sort of take me away from the abuse at home was an Orthodox Christian. She was a very nice lady. She was crazy because, of course, there's nothing crazier than a convert, which she was. And my sister was also with me, and she got baptized the same day I did. Again, we were very young when it happened. She was a few years older. And maybe that's why she didn't stay for long. I stayed up until, I would say, like, my mid-teens. So it was most of my life before I was an adult. Hi, Blinsky. My cat clearly has a lot to say about this. But yeah, so I was essentially training from the age of 6 to be a monastic, with different age-appropriate exercises and religiosity, I guess you could say. I remember, like, it started out with just some basic things, like using a prayer rope every night, and then eventually it became more restrictions on, I was forbidden to cut my hair. I did date someone very briefly, kind of rebelliously. But yeah, that was going on from the ages of 6 until I left. Another thing that we were taught is, I guess in general, the reason I was interested in being a monastic from a young age and actively encouraged by the church I went to, I'm not trying to say that it's a regular thing for young children to be encouraged to live a life of celibacy in the church I went to, but it was explained to me very young that there were different roles for men and women in the church, and that men could essentially become priests if they wanted, married or unmarried. They had a lot less restrictions on that. or they could do missionary work for God. I'm pretty sure that Orthodox women are also allowed to do some missionary work, so I don't think that was a very good explanation, but essentially, that was what I was taught that men could do. Become some sort of priest, a monk, something of that nature, or get married and have a family. In women, it was very similar. The 3 roles I was taught at a young age was I could be a normal layperson and have a lot of babies, which as a young child that didn't appeal to me. That still disgusts me today. As far as the other things I was taught is you could be a presbytera, though most women didn't actively seek that out. A presbytera or presbytera is essentially just a Greek word for eldris, and it means you're married to a priest. It's a position of honor, but doesn't actually come with any real power, in my mind. I mean, I knew old ladies who would go to the presbytera for advice, even if she was a pretty young lady, but I didn't actually know any who didn't just echo their husband's opinions. The other thing I was taught is that anyone could be a monastic. Now, that was, of course, very different for men and women, obviously, on exactly what you could do. Like, just because you're a monastic woman doesn't mean that you're, able to do everything a priest can do. But I thought it was interesting. I like the idea of, giving up food and money and the world, essentially, for God. We were always taught that the world as a concept was evil, in a way. It was, it's not necessarily bad, they said, to be worldly. It was okay for people outside of the church to be worldly, and you shouldn't judge them for enjoying things. But in practice, that was not at all what we actually were demonstrated to behave as. I'm not sure if that makes sense. We were taught to not judge, but clearly judgment was a very regular part of it. I would say the much more sinister part of what I was taught was I was taught to have an admiration, especially for child martyrs, and essentially young children who, when Orthodoxy was not legal in a lot of places, there was a lot of admiration for the idea that you should train your children to be prepared to die for Christ, just in case. They said that one day Christianity would become illegal again, is what they said. I say just in case, but that wasn't what we were taught. We were taught that one day they would come for the Christians again. And looking back on that now, that's just ridiculous. At least where I live, that's absolutely not going to happen. If anything, while a lot of the people in the church are still part of ethnic groups that face racism, I wore headscarves around as a young child, and sometimes I would get people who acted ugly with me because they thought I was Muslim. No one was ever bothered by me being a Christian. but still, I wanted to bring that up because it's hard to explain just such a deep admiration that we had for child martyrs and for anyone who gave up their life for Christ. I chose, because, you know, since I was just barely a convert, I got to choose my patron saint, and I chose Saint Hope. For those who aren't familiar, there's the three child saints, Hope, Faith, and Charity. And actually, it made my, who would become my godmother, the woman I mentioned who got me away from my abusive home as often as possible. She got really excited when I told her I wanted to, I was so inspired by the story of Saint Hope, Faith, and Charity that I decided that I wanted to name myself after Hope, because her patron saint was Sophia. Sophia is the mother of the three children who buried all of her kids and then prayed at their graves until, I think, like, she died the next day is the story. She essentially, I don't know, died of despair or heartache, or maybe it's just God's gift to her to send her to be with her children. That's the story of Saint Hope, Faith, and Charity. I chose Hope because I believe she was the youngest, and like, when she went to the emperor, the story is essentially that she said, hey, you killed my other siblings, like, I don't even, like, want to live anymore. Like, you can dismember me, throw me into a fire, like, whatever, do your worst. And so, like, she faced, like, 3 times the amount of torture as the others. And I liked that story, you know, as a kid, to give you an idea of, the kind of fervor, that we felt. But yeah, I wouldn't say it was all bad. There was definitely parts of it I really admired. Like, I did love going to monasteries generally. I mean, there's some, I'll make another video about my experience at monasteries, because there are some mixed events with that, but generally, I liked being away from the world. I liked having the time to meditate and reflect and see nature. And I think that's still a very important thing for anyone's development. Linsky, you just like showing off. And other things I liked about Orthodoxy, I loved wearing headscarves. I still wear them pretty often. Got one right now, but it's just kind of around my shoulders. But, yeah, I mean, it was generally, I realize, a bad thing. I don't think any kid should be indoctrinated into that, and that's why I kind of have a channel here. I want to explain, the historical and the theological questions, as well as kind of go into the politics of today. Because there's a lot going on right now in the church, and it needs to be spoken about, and explained to people with a perspective that's not just trying to convert them. But, I'm also not saying you can't be Orthodox. I don't necessarily agree with it, just like the church doesn't agree with my bisexuality, but, we can agree to disagree. But yeah, essentially, yeah, I just kind of wanted to go over those things here and kind of explain just initially what this channel's about. If anyone has some questions, I'm more than happy to answer them. You can always put them in the comments. But yeah, essentially this is just my first attempt to record something that speaks about my personal experience. And I've touched on so many topics in even this video that I want to explore deeper. Yeah, thank you for listening. So the normal sayings, like my fellow brothers and sisters in Christ. So you guys can be my siblings in sin.